Welcome to Retire Vivid. I'm Karen McCarty. That's Tommy Breitbach. And today's episode is, can you afford to retire early? I mean, I would like to retire early.
I'm sure everybody's had that thought at some point.
I mean, the question is, Tommy, are we taking the right steps, in order to retire early? Because, we got a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. Because the one thing we don't want to have happen is we don't want people getting hurt, especially because of all these different variables that we're going to talk about.
If it's something you've been thinking about, planning for, working towards, is that early retirement, you've probably thought through the process, maybe some things of what life is going to look like with an early retirement. It's kind of the shock factor if you're forced into that early retirement. And that's where, everything happens at once and you really need to sit down, evaluate where you're at and get that plan together.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there. The question is, number one, can we financially afford to retire? And the other question is are we forced to retire? But does that mean that we can stay this way? Because one of the things we're going to talk about is health insurance. What are you going to do about health insurance when you retire? Because at age 65, that's Medicare. But Tommy, so much of people's wealth is inside of these 401k plans. So I want to talk about a couple different routes of what our viewers should be looking at prior to retiring.
If they take one thing away from this episode, is to review the rule. It's called the Rule of 55. Just make sure they're aware of it and thinking of it. And that allows access to the employer-sponsored plan, whatever that is, 401k, 403b, TSP, from the employer you most recently were working for, and you retire after the age of 55.
So Tommy, there's 5 things that we want our viewers to know about when it comes to the Rule of 55. So let's talk about that. The first one is public safety employees. So this is for firefighters, police officers, EMTs, air traffic controllers. We do work with those folks. They actually can do it a little bit sooner, which is kind of nice.
It's a great benefit. Just one consideration in there, whether it is 50 or 55, you can be looking at a 30, 40-year retirement. So, there probably is an evaluation of what the asset level is, what the income need, just making sure that plan in place. The second piece of the Rule of 55, I mentioned this, but it was the plan specific to the employer you left. So it's not, a 401k from 2 jobs ago, IRAs, if you had taken an old 401k, moved it into an IRA, they have different rules we'll get into in a little bit. But it is that plan specific to the employer you just left. So if this is something you're planning for, if your current 401k allows rollovers in, maybe you consolidate an old 401k into that and get a bigger asset level available to you in an early retirement.
And you're right, because the one thing that we're trying to avoid here is a penalty, right? So this is, again, for people that are specifically that have not rolled their money to a traditional IRA. Because Tommy, a lot of people know this. When you turn 59 and a half, and you take money out of a IRA, for example, we're subject to that penalty. So that's why folks were talking about this, because again, if you have not rolled out your money yet, you need to be looking at this Rule of 55. Then Tommy, to your point of keeping the money in the plan, also you must leave your job the calendar year that you turn age 55 or later.
Right, and it's not where you left or were forced out at 53 and then that money's been there for 2 years, you can access it at 55. It is a retirement or job loss, at or after the age you turn 55.
Now, the key here, the balance must stay in that 401k plan while you're taking those withdrawals. That's critical. Critical in order to utilize this Rule of 55.
Mentioned IRAs, but yes, it is that you are accessing that 401k or 403b, TSP, whatever it is. It's not, those funds moving to a different account and still being able to access them.
Also, what you can do is you can withdraw your money from your 401k, even if you get another job. That's kind of cool.
You mentioned health insurance, Medicare. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But if there's, if you are working a part-time job for health coverage, just minimum hours to get health coverage, just to cover that portion of it, you can still supplement from that old 401k.
That's for folks that have not rolled out their 401k plan. So, but let's say they did. Maybe they didn't mean to, or they didn't know, or hopefully an advisor, I hope, did encourage it, especially if they need to utilize that money during retirement. So what options do those people have?
You know, the first reaction, if you have been kind of forced into early retirement, is to say, I want nothing to do with my prior employer. I want my assets all away from them.
I want it out of the way.
Just take a calming breath and review your options on the rule of 55. But for those who have, moved assets into that IRA, there's still it's called the rule of 72T. It's a series of substantially equal periodic payments, far more restrictive than the rule of 55, which is why we've spent so much time on that. But you are able to access your IRA prior to age 59 and a half without the 10% penalty, and you have to, very specific calculation requirements, but essentially it is the longer of 5 years or until you reach age 59 and a half. So if you're 53, you have to continue those payments for 6.5 years. If you're 57, you continue them for 5 years, even beyond that 59 and a half. Several calculation methods, a whole bunch of details involved, but far more restrictive than the rule of 55.
But here's the thing though, Tommy, I mean, it is very critical that our viewers do this properly, because I can tell you one thing, if you don't do it correctly, it is not a good thing.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to work with, either do a lot of research or work with a financial professional or a tax professional that can make sure, all the proper steps are taken, because there's kind of one way to do it right and a lot of ways to do it wrong.
A lot of ways to do it wrong, that's for sure. I mean, because for example, let's just say that you're 3 years into it and you then messed it up. Those 3 years that, in terms of you taking that money, is now penalized.
Yeah, depending on the size of that income or withdrawal need, you can be looking at a substantial tax bill on that 10% penalty for everything you've taken prior to that point.
Okay, so we just talked about the rule of 55. So that's for people that have not rolled out their 401k yet. Why and reasons you may want to do that. We also talked about for people that rolled money out of the 401k to a traditional IRA, there's the 72T. Okay, so we just talked about the money. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the other aspects, the other variables that it comes into retiring early. So make sure you stay with us right after the break.
Do you have questions about your retirement plan, or do you want to know if you are on the right track? We are here to help. Simply go to retirevivid.com or call the number below to schedule a 15-minute retirement review. You can speak with us about taxes, Social Security, your 401k, or any quick retirement questions at no cost to you. We are here to make retirement vivid. Schedule your 15-minute retirement review today.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're talking about ways to retire early, whether you're forced to retire early or maybe we have the financial means to retire early. We just got done talking about the 401k plan. We talked about the traditional IRA, the rules and that you're eligible for potentially. But Tommy, money is a means to get us somewhere. But now we need to talk about the other components of your overall retirement plan.
In the first section, you're looking at the rule of 55 or 72T. That's kind of a bridge window. And now we're moving into some of the longer term income solutions. So,
right.
For those, most people are going to have a Social Security decision to make. If you have a pension, we're seeing fewer of those, but some of the public sector employees, private plans are kind of going away. But evaluating all your options surrounding kind of the retirement income, and then also looking at supplementing with your assets.
I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, the pension days are basically over. I mean, unless, here in Iowa, if you have IPERS, hallelujah, you got a pension. If you're a federal employee, you got a pension. But a lot of people don't. And so that's where Social Security comes in, because that's a retirement paycheck for life. I mean, because here's the thing. We got our Social Security, we got our IRA 401k. The question is, when do I take my Social Security and how does it blend with my other assets? And it's not just that in terms of the income, the income that we need. It's also, are we single? Are we married, divorced, or widowed? I mean, everybody has a different option when it comes to Social Security.
We do spend a whole episode on Social
We
Security,
do.
essentially. But
Yeah.
For most people, the workers' benefit is an 8-year window from 62 to 70. Those widows or widowers are eligible at 60, so that's a good benefit to be aware of. But you're looking from 62 to 70. Everybody has a full retirement age that kind of falls in 66 to 67.
Right.
If you are going earlier than that, you take a reduction on your benefit from your full retirement age amount. You take a reduction at 62, 63 up to your full retirement age amount. Once you hit that, you get a delayed retirement credit from your full retirement age to 70, and then it stops there. So claim at 70 if you haven't. But it's evaluating the longevity of retirement, and if we take that early Social Security benefit or early pension election, it's a reduced benefit. And so evaluating how it makes sense to maybe delay, build up a survivor benefit, or do we claim early because we need it?
Exactly right, Tommy. I mean, to your point, I mean, that's the beauty of Social Security. Like, just like I just said, it's a retirement paycheck for life. And so, but that leads to the next thing, because the number one fear of retirees is running out of money. And so when you look at your 401k plan, especially if we're going to retire early, we need to do a pressure test on this thing to make sure it lasts as long as you do. Because that money, number one, you worked hard for it. And then number two, we want to make sure it lasts as long as you do.
People typically have Social Security and maybe an IRA as their largest monetary asset that they're accessing for income. And so if you're sitting there thinking you've retired early, you might be accessing that account for 30 years, maybe 40 years. Life expectancies are getting longer. And so it's very important to evaluate how you're invested, what your withdrawal rate is. Kind of the general rule of thumb most people are aware of is kind of the 4% rule. So
Right.
It says if that first year you take a withdrawal, if you take 4% of it, off $1 million, that's $40,000 a year. You can make a little inflation adjustments in different studies. But that, by and large, that has been shown, if invested kind of moderately or so, it lasts for 30 years.
Right. I mean, the whole point is we don't want to hurt your 401k plan. I mean, that's why we're talking about this 4% rule, because again, we want your money to last as long as you do. Especially with all the other costs, keeping up with inflation, you name it. Well, we'll talk about the next one here with health insurance in just a minute. But your return is so important as well too. Meaning that while we're working, our job is to feed our plan, right? It is to fuel it as much as possible. And then on the other end, your money needs to be working for you, growing. But then once you retire, you're not putting money into that anymore. You're now withdrawing from it. And so that's why your rate of return is so important, because again, we want to hold things together and also grow.
Just depending on the income need, the asset level, if you're looking at that 4% rule, if you're invested too conservatively, your money's not growing or recouping the withdrawals. If you're too aggressively, you may have some good years, but a large drawdown in that account, makes it harder to kind of recoup that original principal level if you are still taking withdrawals. So it's really important to sit down and evaluate all your options, make sure your portfolio is tailored to what you want it to do.
With so many options that people have as consumers and also investors, you want to make sure that you are in the right plan. Because to your point, we don't want to get hurt. We don't want to get hurt. We want your money to be doing what it's designed to do. Okay, now let's move to the next one. We can't forget about, this one really should be towards the front. Health insurance. Health insurance.
Age 65, most people are eligible for Medicare. So that's kind of an important milestone once you get there. But prior to that, if we are looking at retirement early, you may have options to continue, COBRA through a prior employer. You have marketplace plans available to you. It's as you're sitting down evaluating these, if you're looking at, maybe COBRA coverage, it can be expensive. And so that's an important piece to put within the budget. If you're looking at marketplace plans, they're available at all income levels, but more affordable at lower income levels. So it may be, restricting some of that income amounts for certain years until we get to that age 65 Medicare eligibility.
For people that can financially afford to retire, I mean, this is the one that they're focusing on. How am I going to bridge myself until age 65? Because I mean, if there's anything that's keeping up with inflation, it seems like it's health insurance premiums, right?
Correct. Yeah, and these are options if we're fully done for retirement. I know a number of employers. We have some clients that have worked part-time or do kind of hobby type jobs, enough hours just to keep that health insurance coverage through their employer, a different employer, until they get to that Medicare age.
Tommy, there's a lot of elements when it comes to retirement planning, but the health insurance one, I mean, we both know this, it is one of the biggest. And so that is also why we offer a 15-minute retirement review. This gives our viewers the opportunity where they can ask us questions about retirement, Social Security, their 401k, anything that they want to know about. We encourage you all to call us on that. So next, we're going to be talking about 3 other elements when it comes to retiring early. Make sure you stay with us right after the break.
I'm Cameron McCarty, talk show host, financial advisor, and business owner.
Did you know Cameron is happily married, raising 4 kids, thinks he's a news anchor?
I don't know about that one.
But did you also know he helps people get retirement ready? He can help you too.
That's why I'm coming to you on the weekends, getting you answers to your retirement questions.
Don't miss him on Retire Vivid, every weekend on ABC.
Welcome back. So we are on the final 3 elements, if you would, for retiring early. And Tommy, the one that I really want to touch on is, we talked about a lot of good stuff today, but we also got to make sure we have a post-retirement budget. I mean, that is so important. And I know it's that dreaded B word, but I don't care. I mean, we got to have a roadmap. We got to have a roadmap of where we're going in terms of your overall plan.
That's a great point. If we're talking about retirement early, that the retirement hopefully lasts a long time. And if we're 10 years earlier, that's 10 more years in retirement. And so it's so important to sit down and have that realistic budget. A lot of times while people are working, you have your savings goals, maybe contributions to the 401k, and then money beyond that, you kind of get used to spending it. And so at the time you retire, if it's a shock kind of early retirement, it's really important to just take a step back and figure out what we need to spend, what we want to do, and then what are we aspiring to do? The big trips, take the family somewhere.
Right.
But it's really important that you sit down and figure out, what do I need to pay monthly bills, and then what do I want to do, maybe more from a social aspect, or maybe going out to eat a few more times, or being a little more active with friends.
When we look at steps, if you would, there's 3 steps that we focus on. So in terms of debt reduction, because once again, retirement it's not an asset problem. Retirement's an income problem. And so when you have all these credit cards sitting out there, or student loans, or you got this mortgage payment, I mean, it eats into your income. That's what it causes these issues. And so the first step is you want to have that budget, right to your point, because we got to know where we're going. The second is pay off all debt except for the house. I mean, this is credit cards, student loans, all of that. We'll deal with the house later. But right now, we want to focus on that debt. And the third, Tommy, is we need to have an emergency fund. I mean, life happens. And again, a lot of people would say to me, well, Cam, I'm not making much in that emergency fund. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's designed to be there for emergencies if we need, new tires, or, a septic system or a new roof or whatever it may be. But these are the 3 steps before we move forward.
Typically the house payment is kind of the largest monthly bill, but it's really important to make sure everything else is done and then put a plan together on the house. So for those who are, seeking, or that's their goal, is to retire early, if you're not forced into that retirement, if you can double up, triple up those mortgage payments, kind of get that taken care of, and then get to more of what you need and want to do.
Now let's move on to protecting your portfolio. I mean, we kind of touched on this a little bit here, but I think this is really identifying what that looks like. And what I like to always talk about is a risk number. The risk number, it really dials into how much risk am I taking on with my portfolio. For example, let's say that you have a risk number of 70, but your risk number is at a 40. Well, let's just say that you've never been happy with your portfolio. Well, no wonder you're not happy, because you're at a 70, your portfolio's at a 40. It's not getting up there with you. But then let's flip it. Let's say that you have a risk number of 40 and you have a risk number of 70. You really won't be happy if we go through a stock market crash, if you would, which can be detrimental, especially if we don't have that income coming in and you're pulling money out of your 401k IRA plan.
2 pieces on that. I'll go back to your budget, the kind of the emergency fund. So if you're sitting there putting together an income plan, you have an unexpected large ticket item, it's important to have a stable asset or some amount that you can access in the event of a large drawdown. If you don't, if your account goes down and then you also need that large ticket item, it's going to be really hard to grow that while taking income, to get that back to your original level. That becomes very important. And then getting into retirement, especially, risk management and sequence of returns becomes important, especially early on. If the account's gone up, and you're taking a little bit out, you can withstand some of that loss. But if you hit retirement, you have a budget, you have a withdrawal need, and your account takes a hit, it's really hard to grow back to where you originally were if you are taking income off of that.
No, absolutely. I mean, it can be extremely detrimental, especially to what we're talking about today, because, a lot of these folks, that are retiring early or forced to, they're pulling from their 401k plan. And then so they're pulling from their plan, and then it takes a hit. Is just, I tell you, it can be tough. That's why you need to build reserves and prepare for this stuff. That's what an emergency is for. I mean, because we do talk about putting away 3 to 6 months of income. People go, well, that's crazy. Why would I do that? Are you going to retire early? I mean, there's reasons for it of why we need to have that emergency fund set aside.
It's just really important that you have access to some funds for those large ticket unexpected items. If your account's growing, great, continue to access it. Maybe you can take a little more because there's been a really good year.
Right.
But it's just important on that down year that you have that money available to you to not, take another piece out of the retirement account.
Absolutely. And so also that leads into our final step here is we wanted to make sure you reevaluate your current spending. Just like what we do with our clients when we're reviewing their overall portfolios that we're managing here or their overall retirement plan, we got to take a look at your spending, because that goes back to one of the other things we talked about. What is that withdrawal rate of what you're pulling from that asset? Because if we're hired, right, in terms of people we're working with, we have a job to do. Our job is because what our clients are seeking, they want to make a decent rate of return, right? They don't want to lose a lot, but they also want to keep up with inflation. I think that's fair in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with their money, because again, when they were working, they were building that 401k plan. And so that's why it's, again, so important that you always reevaluate the spending plan to make sure your withdrawal rate doesn't keep creeping up, if you would.
While we're working, we have that income, we have a savings goal, hopefully, and then beyond that, it's just kind of money that's spent. Sometimes you may not know where all of it ends up, but as you are in retirement, it's really important to know dollar in, dollar out, health insurance. If you are retiring early, it's possible that that's more expensive than you were paying under your employment, probably more expensive than it will be once you get to Medicare.
Right.
So it's important to put all these pieces together and have a plan that works for you.
Tommy, if there's one thing to take away from today's episode, it's to have a plan. So Again, thank you all for joining us. I mean, if you are in a position where you can retire early, or maybe you're forced to retire early, make sure you seek out a professional. I mean, that is why we are doing this show. We are on every weekend talking about retirement, taxes, Social Security, you name it, helping you get retirement ready. We'll catch you next weekend right here on Retire Vivid.
Do you have questions about your retirement plan, or do you want to know if you are on the right track? We are here to help. Simply go to retirevivid.com or call the number below to schedule a 15-minute retirement review. You can speak with us about taxes, Social Security, your 401k, or any quick retirement questions at no cost to you. We are here to make retirement vivid. Schedule your 15-minute retirement review today.
Thanks for watching Retire Vivid. Want to see more? Like and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with exclusive Vivid content. Plus, be sure to watch our show Retire Vivid every weekend. We're here to help you get retirement ready.